Hey everyone, it's Lori at the Land of Color and Camp Chroma, and Ken had posted this in our Facebook group, and he is trying to determine a paint color for this creamy trim color that we see right here. He was able to use an eyedropper and come up with a brown body color that he was happy with, but when he captures this with an eyedropper and takes those values into easyrgb, all of the results are coming out way too green. So he's working in Photoshop, so this might be a little advanced for some of you if you don't know how to use Photoshop or if you don't have Photoshop, but it still will be interesting because we're going to talk about different color spaces and you'll at least get a preview of what you can do in Photoshop if you want to make the effort to learn how to use it. That's the issue that we are going to work on solving, trying to come up with some solutions. This isn't easy because of the way the photo was captured. I'm assuming it was captured with a standard smartphone, tablet, camera with settings set to the small sRGB color space, which means we don't have a lot of color to work with or manipulate. What we can do, since he is working in Photoshop, is we can ask Photoshop to remap this photo into a larger color space. And the larger color space we're going to ask Photoshop to remap into is Sealab. So you guys know the difference between sRGB and Sealab. I'm not going to put up another diagram of sRGB because you guys know what that is. It's the smaller triangle on the human gamut of color. Sealab, of course, is the human gamut of color, so it's a large color space. It's just reformatted into a rectangle with Cartesian coordinates. So the three values that we have in Sealab are lightness, the A-axis, which negative A is green, positive A is red. We have the B-axis, negative B is blue, positive B is yellow. So we can ask Photoshop to remap the photo into this color space and we can control the photo by these three channels. That's the goal. That's what we're going to do. So let's open the Photoshop window. I already have a file open with Ken's photo. The first thing we have to do is change from the default RGB color space in Photoshop to Sealab. So I think I need to increase my window size. Okay, so you can see the menu and everything. So we're going to come up here to, first of all, I'm going to change it to an arrow. We're going to come up here to Image, Mode, and choose Lab Color. So now Photoshop has mapped this photo into the lab color space. And we can start manipulating this photo by the three channels we just discussed. To do that, we're going to use an option called Curves. If I was going to need this original photo for everything, at this point I would make a copy by dragging the layer down onto the layers icon down here and make a copy of it so I still have my original intact. So that's always a good safe thing to do. And then I'd save it at this point, but I'm not going to because really all I want to do right now is try to manipulate this color to make it more creamy, to give me some values for easyrgb that might give me a different result that's not so green. So we're going to come up here to Image, Adjustments, and choose Curves. And you can see here for the three channels, we have lightness A and B, just as we'd expect because we're in the lab color space. I always have my grid and curves set to the smallest grid setting, and you can change that down here. Here's a big grid, here's a smaller grid, because the smaller grid, you know, of course, will give you smaller increments for the changes, and you change your curves by using these two little arrows down here. I'm going to bump up the lightness by just a smidge because I think that's going to help us find a creamier color perceptually and might be closer to what Ken actually saw in person. When you change one side, you usually want to change the other so you keep your diagonal curves line going through the center of your diagram, just so you don't skew the color cast, the general color cast, too much. But you don't have to. If you just want to bump it up on one side, that's fine. This is a lot of eyeballing. You have to do this by eye. A lot of this involved here is strictly what looks good, and if that's what you were going for. So I bumped up the lightness a notch. The next channel I'm going to adjust is the B channel. This is the blue-yellow channel. And I'm going to see what happens when I bump up the yellowness. And of course I want to do the same thing on the other side to keep it balanced. And I'm going to bump up the blue by 1. And I'm going to click OK. And at this point I'm going to go grab my eyedropper. I'm going to click on a nicely illuminated spot. And I have it in my swatch box. Double click on my swatch. And Photoshop is giving me the lab values for this newly adjusted color. And it's 85, -2, and 11. So then I'm going to open easyrgb. And I'm going to choose match color data. And I'm going to change the data type to Sealab. And I'm going to enter those values that we got from the new color in Photoshop. And I'm going to choose all collections and select match. And here are the results for those lab values. The first one, the closest match to those lab values, is Classic Gray from Pratt & Lambert. A Ralph Lauren color, it's called Architectural Cream. Kelly Moore color, Pearly Putty. And so you can, oh, and here's Farrow & Ball's Off-White. So you can see how you can manipulate the lab values in Photoshop and adjust the color cast of the photo that you have. Even though it was captured in a smaller color space, you can expand that a bit by remapping it into lab color. So it's just a matter of going back and forth between Photoshop and easyrgb and playing with the values to see if you can get close to the creamy color that you're after. I'm going to try to adjust this one more time. Image adjustment curves. Let's try the A channel and see what happens if we adjust the red and the green and see if we can get it to be less green. I'm not going to make each side equal. I'm going to put that one about halfway through and the red one up there and click OK. And then I'm going to take my eyedropper and sample the new trim color and take a look at these new values. It definitely moved it from the yellow hue family into the orange hue family. So it looks kind of peachy here in Photoshop, but let's go take a look at these values in easyrgb. So it's 85, 5, and 14. So we'll come back to easyrgb. We're still in the Sealab data type. The values were 85, 5, and 14, I think. So let's see what we get. Yeah, it was 85, 5, and 14. And match in all color collections. And we have a Benjamin Moore color called Sheraton Beige. We have Point Beach. Anything else down here? Those look like the closest matches for this peachier color. So if we want to take away some of the peachiness, we can come back to our Photoshop image. And again, we can go image adjustment curves and let's try the yellow channel this time. Let's add a little more yellow and adjust it from this point. That looks good. And let's see what we get with this with these values. 84, 5, and 9, 85, 4, and 9. And let's see what these results, see what colors come up with this result. This looks more promising. We have a Dutch boy color called Welcome White. We have a Benjamin Moore color called Soft Satin. Glidden, we have Driftstone. So I think we definitely moved it more creamy with that last adjustment. And obviously it skews the brown over here quite a bit. But again, the purpose of this photo manipulation was to get closer to the creamy color that Ken saw in person. And that's how I would do it. I would do it in Photoshop. I would, just to review really quickly, we would go image mode, change it to lab color, ask Photoshop to remap this sRGB captured photo into the larger lab color space. Once we're in here, we would go image adjustment curves, and we have our 3 channels from the Sealab color space: lightness, A and B. A again is red and green channel, B is the yellow and blue channel, and using this diagram here, that's how I would make the color adjustment to change the color cast of this creamy color in this photo. So if you have any questions, just let me know. Let me know if you try it and what kind of results you get. So thanks for watching, everyone.